In Hollywood, if a film bombs this badly, it's usually buried forever. We're talking a $58 million movie that barely scraped past $1 million at the box office. They cut it with a lawyer in the room, it played in just one theater, and it essentially killed its director's career. But Quentin Tarantino watched this forgotten flop and called it a masterpiece. I'm talking about Adrian Lyne's controversial 1997 remake of Lolita, and Tarantino insists it wipes the floor with Stanley Kubrick's original. According to Tarantino, Kubrick missed the point completely. He took Nabokov's dark and disturbing book and turned it into what Tarantino called a madcap comedy. All the uncomfortable parts were basically sanitized out. Tarantino was blunt. If you're adapting Lolita and you don't show anything genuinely disturbing, you've got it completely wrong. Because Nabokov's book is supposed to be disturbing, you're supposed to feel unsettled watching the world through a predator's eyes. Instead, Kubrick made it clever, entertaining even, which is exactly why Tarantino gravitated toward Adrian Lyne's version instead. He said, "I think Lyne's Lolita is a masterpiece. I don't even know if Kubrick read the book." The story of how this film got made was a total nightmare. It started back in 1990. Carolco Pictures, same studio that gave us Terminator 2, bought the rights from Nabokov's estate for $1 million. Lyne was attached early and spent years rejecting script after script until he approved a draft by Stephen Schiff. He wanted to make something honest and uncomfortable, something that didn't flinch. "It's horrendous what this man does to this kid," he said, "and yet it's hilariously funny. You sympathize with him, against your will." But by 1994, Carolco was imploding. They'd sunk everything into Cutthroat Island, which turned into one of the most expensive flops of all time. To keep the lights on, they tried to offload 2 finished packages they couldn't afford to shoot: Showgirls and Lolita. So both ended up with Pathé, the French studio, and that's where the real trouble began. Production on Lolita was already expensive, about $40 million, but the costs shot up. First, it was delays. Then came the post-production headache. Right in the middle of editing, Congress passed a new law that caused all kinds of panic in the industry. It was meant to crack down on explicit content involving minors, but the wording was so broad it left everyone guessing what was actually allowed on screen. Even though Lyne had already secured an R rating, the studio wasn't taking any chances. So Lyne had to recut the movie with a lawyer sitting in the editing room for 6 weeks, frame by frame. The whole thing dragged on so long, the budget ballooned to nearly $60 million. By the time they had a finished cut, they couldn't find a single US distributor willing to touch it. At first, Pathé tried to sell it for $25 million. No takers. They dropped the price to $10 million. Still nothing. Studios didn't see a controversial art film. They saw a lawsuit waiting to happen. Even DirecTV backed out of a deal to premiere it, afraid of subscriber backlash. So they went ahead with a quiet release in Europe. It flopped. Only Italy showed up, with just over $1.2 million. The rest of the international run brought in a total of $9.4 million. And in the US, Showtime finally stepped in and picked it up for cable. They paid $4 million and agreed to run it in August 1998. But for Oscar eligibility, it had to play in a theater first, so they booked it into one screen in Los Angeles. Just one. It made $19,000. After the Showtime premiere, Samuel Goldwyn Company gave it a tiny theatrical run, 52 screens at its widest. Total US box office was just $1 million. It was dead. Adrian Lyne's career never recovered. After Fatal Attraction, Indecent Proposal, 9.5 Weeks, he was one of the biggest directors of adult drama in Hollywood. But after Lolita, he vanished. He managed one more film, Unfaithful, in 2002, and then nothing. Didn't direct anything for 20 years after that. Jeremy Irons knew what he was getting into. He actually turned down the role at first, convinced it would hurt his career. It was Glenn Close who talked him into it. She told him working with Adrian Lyne would be worth it, and he agreed on one condition. He made sure to lock in a paycheck big enough to tide him over for a few years, just in case the industry turned its back on him. And yeah, he still stands by the film. I'm rather proud of it, he said later. It's a fascinating movie. I just get tired of hearing opinions from people who haven't even seen it. Line, for his part, always said this was the film he was most proud of, despite it basically killing his career. I didn't want people to forget it by dinner time, he said. I wanted them to discuss it. Well, nobody forgot it, but very few people saw it.